Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. I'm happy to say that my guest today is Audrey K. Dowling of the Portage Hill Gallery of Fine Arts and Crafts. Thank you for coming on today, Audrey.
You're welcome, Gail.
And now her husband is kind of gifted too. You and he own the gallery together, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he works there, and he's written a book, a novel recently, and I invited him to be on with you, but he said he'd already promised Doc Hamill he'd be on Chautauqua Sunrise to talk about it sometime. So that's something those of you in the viewing audience can look forward to.
Nice.
Now, how I first met you was we were in a food buying club with several other families where we'd order food from a health food distributor, and then we'd get together once a month and have a meal together. Everybody'd bring a dish to pass. And I think the one thing that everybody remembers the most about those dinners was that one time, one person brought a salad and everybody else brought a dessert. So it was mainly a meal of desserts, and after that we had to have a rule where if you brought a dessert you had to bring something else too. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but what I remember best about those is I loved watching everybody's kids grow up.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we first started, very few people. You had your son,
Mm-hmm.
and then Penny, I think, had
two.
had two, and then I had my two children. But a lot of people didn't have their children yet. And then as time went on,
and then the Applebee's
right,
had two, and the Fitzgibbons had two,
right.
And
it was fun.
I'm not sure. Yeah, were there any other children? I can't seem to remember.
I can't recall any others.
There might have been. It seemed like there was quite a crew of them.
Right. And that for me, a lot of us were doing the back to the land thing right then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of us lived back in the woods in various type of housing, and we all were gardeners, and it was a really nice social thing.
It really was.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It really was.
And I still run into people, I still run into everybody, and it's fun to keep up with what the kids are doing now and what everyone else is doing.
Now that they're all adults.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So, okay, why did you decide to become an artist?
Well, I've always been interested in art. Even as a small child, I was always making things, and we were raised on 52 acres of woods that had actually 3 creeks that ran through it.
Wow.
And the big one was Bemis Creek.
Oh.
And so we would dig clay and make little things out of clay, and we spent hours in the woods, building structures and doing all the kinds of things that kids always did. We had a barn that had tons of tools of various sorts, which we were pretty much allowed to use. Mm-hmm. And so I was always nailing things together, and I don't know, I just like making things. I just always have. And when as a child, I also liked to play teacher. So I kind of knew I was interested in teaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the obvious thing was art. I would probably can't imagine not living without art,
Mm-hmm.
being an artist. And so art teaching is what I initially went to college for.
Oh, art teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. What college did you attend to study art?
I went to SUNY New Paltz. At the time that I was a college age, I had a Regents scholarship, so I knew I had to go to a New York State school. And your choices were Buff State for art education, were Buff State at that time, and New Paltz, which is in the Hudson Valley. Mm-hmm. And at that point, my parents had moved to New York City when I was in high school. So I was very familiar with that end of the state, and I was raised here in this end of the state, and I just decided that I didn't want to go to Buff State because it was too close to where I was raised, mm-hmm. and I wanted to get a different perspective.
Oh, I see.
So I went to New Paltz, which was in the Hudson Valley, and New Paltz was also perhaps at that time, I mean, it's hard to say because I didn't go to both places, so it's not really fair to make a comparison. But I feel it had the reputation of being a little more contemporary at that time. And if you remember, this was 1970 when I started.
Oh.
It was a year or two after Woodstock. Woodstock's very close to New Paltz. And so there was a lot of, and there still is, it's always been called, quote unquote, a hippie town. And there's a lot of energy and fun. I mean, for me, that's fun. I'm not the drug part, I was never into drugs, but just the freedom, the freedom of spirit and the freedom of creativity, which in an art school you really want.
Right. Now, is that where you met Don, your husband?
I did. Yep.
Was he going to the same college?
No, he was already done. He was already teaching in the area, and we met. And it wasn't really too long after we met that we got married. And we've been married now 44 years.
You
so
recognized each other as soulmates.
I think we did. I think we did, yeah.
Well, that's a good long time to be married by today's standards.
Yeah.
So, okay, what mediums do you enjoy working with the most?
Well, there isn't really a most. Fortunately for me, because I own the gallery, I always have a place where if I want to do an exploratory piece, which is what I really like doing, doesn't matter what medium I'm doing it in, but I really like to explore and try different things, that I have a place I can show it. So that gives me a lot of freedom that a lot of artists don't have. So I like working with, like I said, as a child, I used to dig clay out of the creek and make things. And you still do. And I still do. I still get my hands into mud and clay, and that's fun. I like to throw things, but I also like to hand build and paint. But I also love painting on paper as well, and that's primarily what I brought in because I didn't want to risk breaking something carrying pottery in. And so I paint, and I also do block printing. So when we get to actually talking about specific pieces, I can explain that a little better.
Now, do you know John Muka by any chance?
I do.
Yeah, he's been selling his stuff at the Chautauqua Craft Market the last couple of years.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah, I guess he gets his clay right. He goes out and gets it himself, he says. At least that's what he's always telling his
well, he probably
does. You know, he says this
does.
Is Chautauqua County clay. So
the thing about buying, the reason I don't do that is because there's a lot of cleanup of that clay, and it's a very time-consumptive way to work with clay, because you have to, I don't want to get too technical, but you have to dry it out, you have to crunch it up, you have to reconstitute it, you have to screen it. There's a lot of work, and then it's not as plastic, so you can't throw it. You know, he hand builds. And so it limits you to what you do, and you can only build it so large because it doesn't have the same body that clay that you buy. So I've just sort of gone a different direction than that.
Yeah, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to do things the easier way, doesn't it?
Well, you know, it depends on what you want to be able to say. I can't say that I'm using Chautauqua County clay, and you know, he can, and so that's right. That's the direction he went. But
yeah, I think a lot of people are impressed by the fact that they're buying something that's actually made out of something, you know, from the ground around here, you know.
Right. Well, all the clay I use is from the ground, too.
Well, yes, but somebody's cleaned it up for you. They probably have special machinery and everything that does all the work.
Yep.
So you've also taught art in schools. Which schools did you teach in?
Well, I've actually taught art. My first 5 years of teaching was in the Hudson Valley, and I taught high school art. And then when we decided to have children, we decided to move back here where my family was all situated. And
so they could see their grandchildren grow up.
And so at that point I took 5 years off of teaching to give my boys a good start. And when I went back into teaching, I'd always, just before I'd left teaching. I was in part of a group at the school to add gifted education to the school, and it was always been a passion and an interest of mine. Back when I was a student, what they would do is they would just accelerate you. So I actually went to college quite young, and when I started teaching, I was only a year older than some of my high school students.
Oh, really?
So
Wow.
I didn't really think that was necessarily.
So you skipped grades in
I did,
high
yeah.
school? Wow,
Yeah, just
okay.
one. Just
So you
one.
must be a genius then.
No, but at any rate, that's what they did in that time period for some student, and so I was always interested in it, and so that's what I went back into. I went back into teaching gifted kids, and got very actively involved. I was active on the state level. I was president of New York State Gifted Ed Association, and I used to go to the state ed building in Albany and advocate, and also was part of a group there. I helped put together the test for teachers who wanted to get certified in gifted education. I presented to the Board of Regents, so I've had a very strong background in that, and was very active in that for a long time. And then the last 5 years of my teaching, well, mixed in with gifted ed though, while I was teaching, I was a teacher out here for BOCES, and mixed in with gifted ed at the same time, I taught special ed art, which I really dearly love too. Something I like, the outlier student, the student that isn't, the students that are there, sort of out on the ends,
Right.
one way or another. They're just more interesting as far as I'm concerned. And so I was very fortunate to work with students of many different types, and so that was very interesting to me. And then I also, my last 5 years, I also taught alternative ed for BOCES. So I've worked for many, many, many different school districts in this area.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, there was one group home that my husband and I were working in where there was a young lady that apparently took your art classes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you know who I'm talking about?
Not necessarily, but there were,
I
I
can't
know.
really mention her
Yeah,
name.
don't
but,
mention names.
But anyway, we used to notice on her report cards, she was quite young when she came to live at the group home, and she would bring these report cards home, and there was usually a really good grade on them, and we were thinking, well, she must really like art class, that she's getting that Audrey's giving her these good grades.
Yeah.
So,
I think most of the students really did like art class. And it's hard not to like art class if it's well taught and you're doing things interesting.
It is. It's actually, I have to admit, it's more fun than the more academic stuff.
Well, it's pretty academic too. I would never say art was non-academic.
I mean, it's not like social studies class or and stuff like that, So.
Yeah, you use a lot of your brain though when you're doing art. And people are always surprised if you've painted for several hours in a day, you're exhausted by the end of the day because you're always making decisions the whole time. The whole time you're painting, or if you're doing one-of-a-kind, not just functional pottery, but if you're doing one-of-a-kind pieces, you're always deciding all the time, do I want this form or that form? Do I want to do stamping on it or I don't? What do I want to draw on it? What don't I want? There's always, it's always, and that's what keeps it fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be doing it.
Well, I used to get a lot of good constructive criticism from my high school art teacher. I remember making a paper mache elephant one time. We were doing paper mache, and I decided I was going to, after it was all put together, I was going to paint it in a patchwork pattern, where
that sounds like
squares
fun.
of different colors. Right. And this is why you need art teachers, I guess. I'd mix the colors, make a color by mixing two colors together, and then I'd just paint one square, and then I'd work with another color and do that. And she came along and saw how I was doing it, and right away she told me, you should paint a whole bunch of squares first with one color combination. You mixed, it'll go a lot faster that way, she's going, things like that. Things like that, were very helpful to me. I found out.
Mm-hmm.
So I really loved art class. It was one of my favorite classes in school.
Nice.
So why did you decide to open the Portage Hill Gallery?
Well, when we first came back to this area, I started doing local shows, and I got to know the local artists in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of interested and intrigued with the thought that a lot of them showed in really good national shows, but when you talked to them, they said you could never market locally. Forget about marketing locally.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that can't be right. You know, there has to be
Mm-hmm.
a way to market locally.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I had taken a very, very part-time position down in the Westfield Artist Co-op as their education director.
Oh, I see.
And so I put an ad in the paper, or I think it was an article in the paper about the things we were having, and then I also put a couple lines in there inviting any artists who might be interested in forming a professional artist group with the thought of marketing locally. And I set up an evening when we could all be there. And fortunately for me, Kevin and Marcy Mathers showed up that night, and they thought they could see real virtue in it,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to run with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And they had lots of friends that I was sort of new to the
Mm-hmm.
art community out here, but they had a lot of friends out here that weren't. So with Kevin's help, we set together, there was a group of 4 of us actually that really got active, and we started the Chautauqua Craft Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first year, we met, the 4 of us met, I think about at least once a month. It may have been every other week, or may even have been weekly, I don't remember now. And we came to the understanding or the realization that having a show on the grounds of Chautauqua would probably be really good for the regional artists. To have a really good marketing opportunity. And we knew it would have to be juried and it would have to be high quality.
Mm-hmm.
So we went with that premise. And so we started the Chautauqua Craft Alliance shows. And
Which they have 2 of every summer.
they have 2 juried shows every summer. They're all high quality professional artists. And at the time when Kevin and I started it, the concept that Kevin really wanted to go with, which was fine with me because it sort of fed right into regional marketing, was that he wanted to have a good show, good quality show, that he could count on always getting into.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens sometimes with the other shows, he was, getting accepted maybe 10 years in a row. You get to expect that you're going to be able,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly you're not in that
Mm-hmm.
show and not accepted that year. And if it's a big part of your marketing, it's a bit of a blow.
Oh, yeah.
So part of our premise when we first started, it's no longer like this, but when we first started was that if you were accepted in, you could count on being accepted into that show until you didn't want to do it anymore.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
But that was only for Chautauqua County artists. It wasn't for the artists we invited in.
Mhm.
They were still juried in. And we certainly didn't have enough of us that we could fill a whole show.
Yeah.
So we always juried in people from outside the area,
Mhm.
but they did not have the same promise of in perpetuity membership.
Oh, I see.
So,
Yeah.
long story short, though, after we got the show off and running, I began to realize that it would be really good to have a year-round marketing location for regional artists. And so I did it.
Yeah.
So I opened up Portage Hill Art Gallery with the mission in mind that it would be a year-round location where people could come and purchase and the regional artists' work. And we've been doing it, as I said earlier, for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And once my husband retired from teaching, we added in framing. He went to framing school,
Mhm.
and so now we have framing.
So you can provide this for other artists that don't want to make their own frames?
No, artists can hire him to do framing, but no, mainly most of his framing customers are people that are not artists.
Oh,
They're-
I see.
But it's a service for our framing for our customers.
Oh, I see.
so that, you know, we used to sell paintings and stuff, and then and tell them where to go take them to get them framed. And after a while, it seemed like, hey, wait a minute. Once he retired.
We're sending everybody someplace else.
Right, when we
Maybe
could be-
we'd better start offering
Yeah.
the service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, who are some of the people whose work you carry in your gallery?
Well, in addition to my own work, I carry the work of, well, from the art trail, other members of the art trail. I have Nancy Nixon Ensign's work. She's a painter. I have Tim Severson, who's a contemporary painter, likes to do figures and abstract work. Karen Glosser, who some people know, she just did a whole series of Lake Erie waves. She's a photographer, gets up really close on the waves and does some really interesting work. Along the line of photography, I also have the work of Jamie Hoggard. Jamie spent a big part of his life out west, and he also uses a view-style camera, which is the old-style camera with the hood. You know, you throw over the hood, and they have great big negatives, so you can have a really deep depth of field and still have things in focus way back. And he specializes in black and white, although he also does color imagery.
Oh, I love black and white photography.
Yeah, I do too. It's very classy. And we also have the work of James East, who was actually a music professor at SUNY Fredonia, but once he retired, when he was in high school, he could have gone either art or music. He had a lot of talent in both. Decided to go music, and then when he retired, he's sort of been getting up to speed with his art side, and he does really wonderful landscapes. And then we also have some artists that are from Pennsylvania, and I have the work of Thomas Paquette. Thomas Paquette is very well known. He's had over 400 one-man shows, and he does a lot of landscapes of the national parks and some local landscape also, but very nice, beautiful work. And his wife, Ellen, does animals that she dresses up. They're anthropomorphic animals, and she has a background in art history.
Okay, these animals, are they pictures of animals?
Paintings, yeah.
Paintings, okay.
Yeah. And she also has some prints there, too. That's another thing I should mention is, although everything that hanging on our walls are originals, we also do have some prints from people, and you're not necessarily going to break your bank to come in and purchase something. So we really like to sensitize regional people to the idea that they really should try to support local artists. And if you're buying a wedding gift, you might be able to buy something at the gallery that is less than going to Walmart and getting a toaster. You know,
yeah.
And people will always say, I know the handmade items that I was given as wedding presents. They're the ones I remember. When I look at them, I remember the person who gave them to me. And like I already mentioned, it's 44 years ago.
Yeah.
I think about the person, but if a person gave me sheets or money or whatever, I don't remember those people. So it's really kind of nice to give art or a housewarming gift, or you know, there's lots of different reasons to give people a nice piece of art.
Right. Well, let's look at and talk about some of the things that you've brought to show us today.
Okay. All right.
Shall we start with the window?
Sure.
Did you do these then?
Yeah,
Yes.
these are every piece that I brought with me is my work.
Okay.
This is a series that I'm doing of waves, and I call them wave action. And I actually have about 12 of them, I think. One very similar to this just got into a show that's going to be in the Thousand Islands this summer.
Oh, okay.
The Thousand Islands Art Center are celebrating their 50th, I believe, anniversary this year. So they had a call for art. When a call for art, you can send in via the computer digital images of your work, and they have a juror, and they'll choose whatever they decide to choose.
Yeah.
So one of that series will be there. So that's always nice. But I wanted to capture. I watch the waves a lot. We have a Lake Erie cottage And I watch the waves a lot. I always have. My grandfather was a sea captain. My father was at sea for 15 years.
Wow.
Even when we were kids, my dad would take us to the ocean, and he and I liked to watch the waves. And so that's sort of capturing that feeling of the waves.
Okay. They are, the blues, the shades of blue are very beautiful.
Thank you.
And then there's, on the big easel back there, there's a big picture.
Okay. Well, this is part of a series that I do when we're traveling with a camper. Wherever we are, I will go to the farmer's market and I'll get fruits and flowers, and I'll set them up. And this place was in Michigan, at Sleepy Bear Dunes National Park. It was extremely rainy on that camp. So I actually had this sitting on the table in the camper, and I was looking out the window because I was not going to sit out in the rain and paint. And so I wanted to capture that sort of wet, woodsy, out. The camper was in the woods, and so the wet, woodsy in the back, and then these were the fruit and the flowers that I got at the farmer's market, and I just painted them. So I have a series of different ones that in different places that have bouquets of flowers and fruit set on location.
You just caused me to remember something when you mentioned going camping. I seem to remember something about, was that an old hearse or an ambulance that
we used to have,
that you and Don had to go camping with at one time?
Yeah, it was just like the Ghostbuster one. It was the same era. My kids and their friends loved that. But now we have a different kind of camper. But anyways, we've done Donald and I have had an interesting life with a lot of interesting experiences.
Well, I remember there was one other local man at one point in time in my life, a Mayville area man that owned a hearse. And
well, this wasn't a hearse.
He called it a station wagon.
Well, life is interesting.
Yeah.
It's long and it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, then you have some wildflowers.
Yeah.
It looks like back behind yourself there.
What I do when I'm drawing flowers, or really drawing anything, I really am a very strong believer in drawing from the real.
Oh, the real thing.
The real thing, not from pictures. So often with wildflowers, I'll pick them and I'll do either like paintings. That's a painting, or I'll put them I'll draw them onto pots, and I actually literally have the bouquet sitting there and drawing them.
Yeah.
And this one here, this was from Wildflowers. This has a block print in the center.
I like that.
Thanks.
I like
and
that.
so that was a piece of linoleum at one time, and I carved it. And then we were at our cottage, actually. So I printed it, and then I was looking at it and I was at the cottage, and there were lots of ferns growing and jack-in-the-pulpit growing in our garden, and I thought, you know what? I think I am going to extend that out. And add to that. So I actually had never seen anyone do that before, but that's the way I like to work. I like to experiment and just...
Well, people like to see things that they've never seen before.
Right. And a lot of my work has been in a lot of shows, and part of the reason, I think, is because I do experiment, and people get to see work that is unexpected. I had a one-woman show, and one of the reviewer called this the magic square in the middle of the middle of the pieces, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
And
that's similar too, isn't it?
Yeah, this is another one of that series, and this one actually was printed in an international magazine. So that
was it
nice.
really?
Yeah. But always woods related is pretty prominent in my work because, like I said, I was raised on 52 acres, and we used to own 80 acres on the, because we used to come for the food group.
Right.
We now have 20 acres. I just have always really loved the woods. And
now, is that myrtle or violets?
these are vinca right here.
Vinca?
And that's violets. And, of course, that's a trillium.
Trillium, yeah.
And this is a mayapple.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, crows are always in the woods. They're big mouths. I like them, but they're big mouths.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that some people don't like them. They're similar to ravens, except I think ravens are bigger.
Bigger,
Yeah.
The thing about the crow is, in fact, I call this the woods sentinel. They're always there, and they're always letting everybody know you're there. So you don't get to see as much wildlife because the crow's going out there.
When they're there, yeah.
But on the other hand, I like them. So, anyways, and this one is a block print. It's a little different. This is a block print that I hand colored.
Oh, yeah.
So I printed it first, and then I hand colored it. And this was again at the cottage Woods. And we also, in addition to having wildflowers, we do have some, I guess you would call them domestic flowers that we planted. So this is forsythia.
Oh, yeah.
And that's more of the vinca. This actually is a trout lily. We kind of have a mixed garden. And of course, obviously, those are daffodils and a few of the violets down in the bottom. But we have a fairly good woods right there, also just off of our cottage.
It's a good picture of spring.
Yeah,
Spring,
it's definitely
early spring flowers. Yeah.
And this is a different way of block printing. This is using a couple of different blocks and running different colors on the blocks. And every winter I will do another block from our backyard and behind the gallery backyard. And this winter, when I did this, it was heavy, heavy snow. So this bush actually we no longer have, but it was just mostly snow blobs. You couldn't really see much of the bush underneath.
Did the snow break it?
No, we just decided that it was getting a little unruly. It was right next to the house.
Oh, I see.
And we decided to take it down.
Sometimes that has to be done.
And sometimes it does. This is this year's from that series.
I like that one a
Thanks.
lot. Yeah.
We have a lot of trees in our backyard. Our backyard is almost like a woods too. And then the sun sets behind them, so that's sort of what this is about. And this was printed in a few different colors and then hand-colored. And then I have another I've been doing it for 3 years. I have another one, but I didn't bring from another year. This one was from this past winter. This is the trees right across the road from us, and I've drawn those trees about 1 million times in different pieces, and this one was winter. I call this Bones of Winter. I just really liked what was happening with the blacks and the whites when I was looking out, and I decided I would exaggerate the blacks and the whites, and that's when I did this piece. This piece I did recently. I was at a watercolor class, and she wanted us to do different things with the backgrounds and stuff. So I was exploring, and I thought it came out nice. So
Yeah.
this is one of my favorite flowers, actually, a Jack in the
Oh,
Pulpit.
you like that? That's one of
Yeah.
the ones you like the best.
Yeah, when I was a small child, I remember walking along our creek, and I saw my first Jack in the Pulpit, and I was probably 6 or 7, I don't know. And I literally went running back to the house to get my father to come and look at this, because my father and I both liked all things woods. And I thought, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was a flower. I just didn't know what it was. It was a beautiful form, but it looked so unflower-like. It didn't look like my mother's flowers.
No.
That I hauled them out to come see this beautiful thing I had found. And to me, they do have a very beautiful form. I've always really liked them.
Yeah, it is nice to see them, especially when you've just come out of you haven't been out of the winter too long,
Yeah,
and it's
right.
nice to see all of those things.
This one is another one of this series.
Oh, I see.
And this was in New Hampshire. This is actually on the edge of a family member's pond. Actually, where Donald and I honeymooned on this pond.
Oh, okay.
But I went with my aunt. We got bouquet at the farmer's market and the fruit, and then I just set it on the beach, and then drew the beach around it. So
Now you've got something growing out of the water there.
Oh yeah, that's what they have. It's a pond, and these are like weeds that
Yeah.
grow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a great swimming pond, too.
And then there's, looks like birch trees.
Yeah, those are birch trees. I had a neighbor who had a little grove of birch trees that was the inspiration for that piece. And that's a combination. It's painted, it's printed, it's a combination of different things.
Yeah.
Which, is another thing that I love to do. I don't let myself get too locked in.
No.
I like to just go whatever direction I want to go with the piece.
Yeah, that's really nice. And then here's another one of trees behind me here.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's sort of like a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Sort of typical Chautauqua County woods.
Right. Yeah, it's really nice to see pictures. It's nice to see pictures of scenery in of other times of the year during the winter.
Yeah.
When everything's pretty much just white and gray.
Yeah, but you know what? I really like, every winter, I really do like to paint and do block prints and stuff because it's a good downtime for me because it's not that busy here. Although I would love to be busy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I would love to be busy, but it's part of the cycle of,
Yeah, there aren't as many people around in the
That's
winter
correct.
as there is in the summer.
That's correct. And eventually I think local people will realize that they do have to support local artists if they want them to thrive. And there are a lot of areas that have built their whole economy around the arts. We could do that. And one of the reasons that an area can do it is if they have less expensive housing than other areas where artists can afford to come in and buy and set up studios and stuff. We have that in Chautauqua County. We could become one of those designated areas and where people will actually, you get enough artists in an area, then people start to come for that purpose to see the arts and support the local artists. So I'm always optimistic and hopeful that will occur.
I hope so too.
Yeah. So this is actually a poster for a good friend of mine, Jonathan Weston, who has taken over the running of Panama Rocks. Interestingly enough, when I first started out here as a young artist, Panama Rocks had a show, and I used to go and do that show that Jonathan's parents ran. This is the first year for him. He's just worked so hard. It's going to have art. It's going to also have food. It's going to have speakers. He's worked with the Roger Torrey Peterson Center to put this together. And so this is the last weekend in July. So I'm going to recommend that people try and get over there and support what he's doing.
Now, is that a Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday and
Sunday. Yeah, that's the same weekend as the Arts and Crafts Show in the park in Westfield. But that's usually a Friday and a Saturday. So,
and this is going to be juried. It's very high quality. Yeah, super high quality.
So they technically, considering this is Saturday and Sunday, and the other one is Friday and Saturday, people should be able to get to both of them.
Yeah, and they're really different shows.
Yeah.
This one is a super high quality.
And the one in the park in Westfield is more crafty.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't go down to it anymore, so I don't even really know. But when I first came here, that was another show I used to do back when I was first a new artist here in the area. And it was fun. Linda Dunn was running it at that time, and it really was a lot of fun. And she worked very hard at that time to make it a really good show, and make sure that everything in there was done by the person. No one was buying stuff just to sell it. It was all individually done by the artist that was showing. Yeah. It wasn't juried, but it's had a pretty good level of quality just the same. For the most part, though, if you want to see really good work, you almost have to go to a juried show.
Oh, yeah.
Roger Torrey Peterson Center I had a one-woman show there a couple springs ago, and they were really, really, really nice people to work with.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think this show will be wonderful. There's also the 2 juried shows we talked about before. I'm going to be set up at those on the grounds. Those are originally from the Chautauqua Craft Alliance. It's now called the just Craft Alliance and Marv Bierlin and, well, Tina Rassa is the director, and they just put a ton of energy into making that show just a really, really good quality craft show. Fine craft show, which it's always, you kind of hate to say that because people get this image in their mind, but it's like the art level of craft. It's fine art. And people are just happen to choose to use mediums that would traditionally be craft mediums, but they're every bit as an artist. I mean, I laugh when I hear people sometimes try to make that distinction because I work in both areas. And I have to tell you, I don't use a different part of my brain when I'm working with clay than when I'm painting. So I just think that whole argument, and I used to have to hear it. I mean, everybody who's been in art has heard it. The true artists are painters and sculptors, and the rest are craftspeople. That's such nonsense. It's really nonsense. I don't go into my clay studio and say, okay, now I can use my dumb brain. And I go into my painting studio and say, oh, well, I can be smart in my painting studio today. So it's really that distinction is kind of a funny distinction to me.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's, if you're an artist, you're an artist. It doesn't matter what you're using. You could be using recycled stuff. That's huge right now, to go into yard sales and junk shops and find stuff and then repurpose it and make lots of stuff out of it. That's sort of really big right now in the art world. So, I mean, Robert Rauschenberg did that probably before anybody else in the 1940s, 1950s.
Oh, yeah.
And he would do these very abstract paintings, and then he might put a tire on it. I remember one, he had a stuffed goat that had a tire on it, and an eagle, a stuffed eagle, and I mean, he was probably the grandfather of what people are doing now, actually.
Oh, yeah, that sounds a bit weird in a way, but...
Well, he's extremely well, I mean, his pieces are billions.
Are they really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
They have,
Wow.
his works in
Wow.
major museums throughout the world.
Now, do you still carry jewelry that people make?
I do still carry jewelry. In fact, I remember when I used to carry your jewelry.
I know, I've kind of gotten away from that. There were, we went through the thing with the stock market crash.
Oh,
there.
Yeah.
And we went through that, and then there were some other things that came up in my life that I had to take care of. So I've gotten away from that, but I really appreciated you doing that for me at the time.
Well, I was glad to do it. One of the things we like to do is help artists. And in fact, I wore this piece today. This is a new artist, and her name is Karen Taverna, and she does enameled work.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, that's
enamel?
enameled. And I happened to like this one because it looked a little like an abstract piece
Painting.
of painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I carry her work, and I have a lot of jewelry. So
Are those sterling silver beads?
they are, yeah, yeah. And she often will mix them with different agates and different kinds of beads. So
I remember being in the gallery once, for some reason, maybe half a dozen years or so ago, and you had some jewelry that was made by Bruce and by Hillary. No, wait a minute. What was her name? Anita Swank.
Yeah, I don't.
Do you still have
I
any
don't.
of hers?
I don't think that they're working anymore. As far as I
aren't
know.
they?
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
Not sure. Yeah, but we change out and have people's lives change.
Right,
So their
right.
needs change.
So-
But we have a lot of interesting work that we have sculptures, wood sculptures that are by this done by Don Satil, who did the Lincoln in town. He also just recently did the Marmaduke statue in Brockton. Really high quality, really
Things
beautiful.
that he made then
Yeah,
are
beautiful
in the gallery.
carved wood sculptures. We have some of Pete Jones's work. He's a Native American potter. We have some quilted pieces. We have lots and lots and lots of different work and lots of different people's work. And people are always very pleasantly surprised when they come in.
Yeah. So What are you hoping for the future for your gallery then?
Well, it's always been important to us to be a place where people will come to support local art, and so that has never changed. That has always been our mission, and it will continue to be our mission. And of course, over time, since I retired from teaching, I now have a lot more time to devote to my own work. So it's a good location for me, too. Good way for me to... I enter a lot of shows. I get into a lot of shows that are national. I've actually been in a couple international competitions, too, which has been nice.
Oh, yeah.
So I do that, but it's also really important to me to be available locally for people. And so I still continue to do functional work, like functional pots, and I'm always exploring. I'm an explorer. I'm an artistic explorer. It keeps it fresh for me.
Yeah.
And also, my collectors then know that when they come in every year, they're going to see something different than they've seen before. And they'll also see I also redo the same territory where I've been before, too. So it's sort of a fluid thing.
Are people able, do you have a website that people can go to?
I do. It's www.portagehillgallery.com.
And people can actually, can people order things from you over off the website and have you ship them, or do you
Funny
prefer?
You should ask that. I do have a shopping cart on my site, and I do have some giclée prints that were made of my originals. But but I don't have it. Is every winter I say one of my projects this winter is going to be making the website where I have a full-blown sharpening cart, and they'll be able to get pottery and other people's working on. And time just, I don't know. Time does its thing. Time always wins. I'll tell you, time always wins.
Oh, it does. Do you do any photography yourself?
Me personally, no. I love it. It's a hobby of mine. I did take couple of photography courses in college, but there are a lot of people who want to do photography as their main thing, and so I kind of leave that corner to them of the art world. But I still love. I mean, if someone finds me on Facebook or finds Portage Hill Gallery on Facebook, they'll see that I do take a lot of photos. But I have to say that for me, I've just kept that really on a hobby level for me.
Okay.
Occasionally, I'll have people say, "Oh, I really love that. Would you print that for me?" And I say, "No, we've got a lot of professional photographers around here who are doing beautiful stuff. Why don't you look at their work?"
Oh, yeah. So it must be quite a bit of work taking care of the gallery. You have to, not only do you have a lot of red tape probably involved, but you've got to keep everything dusted.
Yeah.
And you're probably doing something all the time.
I am. And I'm also in the studio all the time. I am a studio artist. I'm in the studio almost daily, except when we're traveling. And then when we travel, I'm usually doing some form of art or another. So, yeah, I think that that's the level of commitment that you have to have if you want to be a professional artist.
What advice would you give somebody who wants to become an artist?
Well, I'm a really pretty strong believer that it's not a bad thing at all to get some coursework, and because you're going to learn a lot about technique, but more importantly than that, you're going to be immersed in an environment that is full of creative people. And there's something about that environment that it feeds you. And I don't mean to copy people. I strongly don't believe in copying other people. And I hate to see so-called artists who basically I know who their influences were, and by looking at their work, I know where. And that does not speak well for them as an artist when I see that. But being in an environment where everyone is being creative from within, there's nothing like it. I mean, it's a lot of fun. we just, I mean, it's really a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And the creative people are fun people.
Mhm.
So I think that it's important, and I would strongly advise anyone who wants to go into art to try and get some art training behind them.
Mhm. When I was selling jewelry at arts and craft shows, I remember, well, actually, I've made some of the best friends I have are other artists that I met from doing that. So, and there have been a few others that have been on this program. I have one friend, I wanted her to be one of the first people that was on my program when I first started doing this, because she makes the most beautiful pressed flower art. I mean, she can take flowers and leaves and turn it into a picture of something like a farm with a house and a barn and cows grazing in a pasture and woods in the background. And she is just so good at it, but she is just too shy to come on television with it. She does go out to arts and craft shows to sell it, but other people in the artist group say they can't even get her to teach classes in it, but her work is so beautiful.
Well, you know, everybody's different, and everybody's personality is different, and we like people. We don't mind marketing. That's why it's worked for us to have a gallery. And some of the artists I have don't want to do their own marketing, and that's okay. It's
That's
always
why they come to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always a balance of, and like I said, everyone's different, and everybody has different skills and different skill sets and different talents, and so it's, you know, I don't think that it's any reflection whatsoever on an artist whether they like to be out there or not out there. You know,
Yeah.
The hard thing is, though, if you're not out there, the hard thing is making a living from it, and
Yeah.
you have to be able to market some way or another. In some ways,
Right.
the internet's made that easier for more introverted artists, but not really, because I don't know that a lot of people have sold a lot of work through the internet. Not too many. I'm sure there's some, but not too many. People still like to come and actually see the pieces. And
Yeah, I like to go into a store and look around, and if you see something you want or need, you can have it right then.
That's right.
You don't have to wait for
That's right.
it.
And then the other thing that happens with people is they think, oh, well, maybe I'll just go order that, and it never happens.
They don't get back to you.
Or they don't even go out and, like, they don't look it up, or, you know, whatever. It's that you walk out the door and suddenly some life happens and you forget. And, so I think that, you know, and then I'll have someone come back in sometimes, and they will have wanted a piece that they, you know, for whatever reason didn't buy it when they were in, and I've already sold it to someone else.
And it was a one-of-a-kind
Yeah, and these are
piece.
lots of things are one-of-a-kind pieces. So with art and antiques, if you see something and you love it, you should get it. You should figure out a way to get it.
Like at the certain craft markets and shows and things, like people will see something they want, and but they'll not pick it up then, and then they'll be really disappointed, you know, that they didn't get something. So
Yeah, it happens. Believe me, it's happened many times where people
Right,
have come back
right,
for something and it's already been sold.
yeah, if you see it and you know you're going to want it, get it, because sometimes, like, for instance, there was this one woman at the craft market at Chautauqua that the Women's Club has, and she and her daughter were coming to Chautauqua from like the Buffalo area,
Yeah.
and selling the hair tie things, you know, the scrunchies and
Right.
certain kinds of headbands and
Right.
and things. And well, the mother passed away a few years back, and the daughter doesn't seem to be coming anymore. So people are disappointed, you know. But I think the daughter, you can still get the scrunchies and stuff from her at the Westfield Arts and Crafts Show that they have at the end of July. But well, we're down to about 3 minutes.
We managed to talk our way through an hour, Gail.
Yeah. Is there any other things that you want our viewing audience to know about art or your gallery or whatever?
Well, I just hope that everyone out in the audience gets an opportunity to explore their artistic side and just take the time to do it. I mean, I think sometimes people think if they can't do a masterpiece, they can't do anything. First of all, what is a masterpiece? If you I go to galleries all over the world. I've been with traveling, and you would be surprised to find that in contemporary galleries, I'm not talking about the older work, but in contemporary work, very, very rarely do you see tight realism, for instance. And I think in this area, some people are sort of locked into, if you can't do something that looks super real, then you must not be an artist. Not true. Not true. Get out there and see what art. You know what. Get a copy of Art in America and see what people are doing. You're going to. You're not.
Is that a
going to find-
magazine, Art in
Yeah,
America?
yeah. Go to the Albright Knox. We're not that far. We're an hour away. Go across the street while you're at the Albright Knox to the Birchfield Penny, and you'll see what contemporary artists are doing. And it's the art world is so open that people should explore. And even if they don't want to personally create something, go out and enjoy it.
Right, go look at it. Go to art galleries and look at things.
Right.
I remember going to an art gallery in Buffalo one time and seeing something that was all black and white, and it was black and white cows, and some of them were painted so that their heads were sticking out over the edge of the mat. And things like
cute.
that. I will remember something like that
Right.
because I liked it, you know what
Right.
I mean? So anyways, we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and I'm so happy that you came, and it was a lot of fun talking to you today. We should get together more often.
Yes, we should. maybe have some food too, Gail. Like the old food club days.
Yeah. So, yeah, those dinners were a lot of fun.
Yes,
they
they
sure were. It was kind of like family, wasn't it?
It was. I really felt that way.
I'll see the rest of you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Gail.
You're welcome.